live.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call call to order and welcome you to the Wolverham Regional School District School Committee meeting. It is 5:30 p.m. I see that David Sanders from Wolverham Public Access Channel is recording. Is there anyone else recording this meeting? Okay. We will do roll call and alphabetical order. Sheriff Caroline. Here. Tim Collins.
Present.
Sean Kennedy.
Here.
Lisa Murray.
Here.
Rich Rediker.
Here.
Mike Terramasi. Michelle Boudreau. Here. If you please rise. Sean, will you have no pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we will begin with new business. We will begin with the introduction of new principals. John?
Thank you. It's my pleasure to introduce Darren Bolak, who is a new member of our administrative team, and Jesse Donovan, who is a returning member of our administrative team. They both took their new roles on July 1st and have been working very closely with me through the summer to orient themselves to the new roles and to the new buildings. We have a very strong collaboration underway, and they also have been welcomed, as both said, with open arms by other elementary principals in the district. So I think we're off to a good start. Without further ado, I just wanted to make some space for them to say hi.
You can sit down, and then there's the button right in the middle. You press it, the camera goes on, and we can hear you.
Thank you for welcoming us. As John said, we've been really busy this summer getting acclimated to our new roles. Lots of things happening at Stony Hill this summer. New flooring, curriculum deliveries, hiring. So I'm really excited to welcome students back next week.
Hi everyone, I'm Erin Bolak. I'm thrilled to be here. I grew up over in Long Meadow and worked in Springfield. Recognize the Springfield face over there. I was over in the Berkshires for the past 2 years and decided that my family and I needed to come home to be around our people, and that is exactly how I have felt entering Smile Tree. I have been met with open arms by both the staff, the families, and the students that I've already met, which has been great. Our team of principals, both elementary, middle, and high, have been super collaborative, starting to box up, and everybody in the district team as well. So we are really looking forward to a very collaborative, positive year in both of our schools. And thank you for having us, and please be present and visible in our schools as well. I think that's a big part of our push, is to have more visibility than ever before. So you're welcome to come on down. Thank you.
I want to thank you both, wish you the best, and please let us know if you need anything, what support you need. If you need us to be somewhere at a certain time, please reach out. You know, I know everyone on the committee here, I'm sure will be more than happy to help out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Have a great year.
Thank you.
So we will continue with the school improvement plan. We'll come back. So we will move forward with the student handbook with Lisa Britton.
Thank you. So we have a few additions, revisions to the student handbook this year. I just first want to thank everyone on our administrative team who reviews the handbook and submits the information that we need to update, does the hard work to get the wording just right, and to my assistant Andrea Noonan for putting it all together and making sure that it's ready for families. So, first item on the list falls under a blue heading called non-discrimination. That's an addition to our handbook in response to the Supreme Court decision in Mahmood versus Taylor. Our district affirms its commitment to curriculum and instructional materials that support and respect the civil rights of all individuals and groups. If families have questions or concerns when curriculum content appears to conflict with deeply held religious beliefs, they're encouraged to contact the building principal for more information and support. So we wanted our handbook to reflect that information for our families. The next item on the list is some additions to search and seizure. As you can see highlighted in the blue, the middle and high schools have added the use of handheld metal detectors as a tool to assist in searches, especially for vape paraphernalia. This measure is part of our ongoing efforts to deter the use of vaping devices and promote student well-being. The next addition to the handbook is specific to Wilbraham Middle School. It's tardy guidelines, and you can see them there with the consequences and some important points to remember. The Wilbraham Middle School's tardy guidelines reflect the school's ongoing commitment to strong attendance and its positive impact on student learning. On the next page, there are just a few updates in the National Honor Society section that the high school has shared with us. So just making it clear who is appointing the 5 members of the governing body and the GPA, eligible GPA, and then guidelines around students taking honors level courses by the end of their sophomore year. So that's just updated information from the high school. We have an update to our Title IX information, and public schools are required now to implement the 2020 Title IX guidelines, so we're going back to those. So this update in our handbook reflects the 2020 guidelines or regulations. Sorry, the pages aren't numbered. But the next big section is the revision to the physical restraint and behavior support section. And this has been updated to provide increased alignment with DESE regulations, to identify preventative measures, and to provide increased transparency. And the last bit, I think, was the additional sheet of paper that was not in the packet that Erin just passed out regarding food modifications. In response to recent DESE coordinated program review reporting and in consultation with DESE school food and nutrition programs, there's a new policy you'll be looking at, EFBA, school food and nutrition meal modifications. And this policy would ensure students with disabilities or other special dietary restrictions would be provided meal modifications at no extra cost. And so this information has been added to the 25-26 student handbook in anticipation of that policy. And those are the only additions, revisions that we have this year. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
On the tardy policy, is that to school or to class?
I think it includes both.
So you can be late 5 times in a day? Is that like,
I just want to pull it up in front of me, sorry. So there's, being in the building is not the same as being in their assigned classroom, that's at 7:35. So this, I think, specifically focuses in on the being tardy in the morning, which is not, I think, different from perhaps what the high school does and being present at courses.
so we're saying that not until you've been tardy 16 times in the semester, you get an detention for each one, that's okay? It seems extraordinary. In other words, normally when I tell, it's like, you come tardy, you get a detention that day, and I don't want anybody tardy at all. And I can't believe that you allow somebody to be tardy 5 times for just a warning, then 15 times before they start getting detention, 16, and then it resets, which means, okay, go one more day without tardy, you get to start at the beginning again. It seems kind of awfully lenient if you teach you to be on time.
I think the important thing to look at on number 3, where it's the lunch recess detention, but a tardy action plan, where the school staff would be working with the student and the family to put together a plan so that they don't get to 16 plus tardies. I think that would be the goal. So I think that's the kind of the most important item on the list. How are we going to find out what's going on with that student? What's making them late? Is it a transportation issue? Is it a family concern? Is it a social emotional? Like we want to be able to intervene for that. So 16 is a lot, I agree with you, but we don't want to get that to that.
I would think even at the beginning, you're tardy once you talk to them, why were you tardy? A second time?
Rich,
Right
a
at the
lot of
beginning
times,
anyway, so.
a lot of times it's not the student. When you're talking middle schoolers, these are children, they're not driving themselves, they're not like, so this might be a bigger issue
Talk to
that
the
they're trying to
parents.
work through.
I mean, you
Yeah.
can't get your kids to school on time.
I just wanted to reinforce what Lisa said. According to our attendance plan and according to state law, there is a mandatory meeting with the parents after the 5th tardy. So there are a number of interventions that are attempted before getting to 16 days. I think the reason that the middle school wanted to have this in the handbook and talking to the principal is the prior handbook had no consequences. And when it was suggested that consequences might be imposed for continuing tardies, the response was, well, there's nothing against it in your handbook. So now there is.
The only other, I understand that, the only thing would be resetting the semester. Anyway, next time seems awfully lenient too, so.
I totally understand what you're saying. I think sometimes it is tricky when, once a student gets to a certain point, there's no coming back from it. We want to make sure we give them a second chance to make a plan and implement that plan to get to school, so they're not continually being consequenced, because that could be a negative consequence for them, that they won't come to school. We don't want that.
But we certainly can take that feedback back to Principal DeRosa for next year.
Just to clarify, each of the warnings, the 1 to 5, the warnings, there's some notification that the family receives, right? So they're hearing every time your student was late, and in that warning letter, there's probably some outline of potential future consequences.
They get the automated telephone call, whether if their student is not, if the student's been tardy. So they do get notification for every single tardy. But then you're
Only
talking,
by the telephone, not by email
then
or text message? Because
every
I'd
single one
argue
is
you'll
that.
get much more visibility from the parents by texting
I think that
or
I'm just clarifying, every time there is notification from the automated system, but then there was the warnings that, the reminders, whether it's communicating with families, having a conversation with students, at those early stages, as Rich mentioned, it's important to communicate with them early.
Because, on Sean's point, it's not the kids in middle school. It's the parents. Maybe they come in for...
Give them a time.
We're here to help the whole family.
Yeah, I don't think we can have parents coming for detention.
You should.
Are these online? Because I'd like to read the full text again before the school year starts. Are the new and updated online yet?
The student handbook is not updated yet. We just need to, get
Vote on
the
it.
school committee's approval, and then we'll do that.
Yeah, Aaron, if you could just get those in so we can get a chance to read the whole thing. Thank you.
I think this is in our packet, but once we vote on this evening, then the entire district will have it.
It's in the drive. I'm looking at it in the drive
Yeah.
right now.
Awesome. I make a motion to accept the student handbook updates that we were presented today.
Second.
Any questions or additional discussion?
I just have one question. The students with disabilities, if they're ADHD, they get free lunch? I'm not sure what free lunch has to do with ADHD.
Yep, the policy, and Dr. Provost, you can help me out with that. The policy is stating that students that have special dietary needs or disabilities that need to be accommodated in school during lunchtime would receive those modifications without any extra cost.
That's correct. It's not all students with disabilities. It's if the disability is such that students need to have an alternative lunch. For example, you know, if a certain type of food is being excluded from a student's diet because of a metabolic condition, then that modification is made at no cost to the family.
To be clear, we're still one of 10 states that are giving free lunches to all of our children.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries 7-0. Thank you. So we will invite Dr. Parsons up for the school improvement plan.
Lisa, thank you. Good work.
Thank you very much.
First, hello everyone. It's good to see you. Sorry I'm a few minutes late, but much happier to have our
It was
house.
funny, we were just talking about tardiness, so we're going to have to for detention with Rich Redeker.
But not my parents, you don't have to bring them here. No, it was a much better night to have popsicles tonight than yesterday, so thank you for that. So first off, I'm just excited to share so much growth over the past year in terms of how hard our teachers and staff have been working. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank my school council, which is the next slide, Erin. So just huge thank you to the folks you see on the screen, one of whom is here and is interning with me this year, Kristen McCoy. So which is very exciting. And of course, Jill, Karen, Kristen, Chris, and Bella have just been a huge piece, not only in advising the school improvement plan, but supporting translation between different stakeholder groups along the way, which is incredibly helpful. And so as of this moment, all of those people are planning to return to the school council this year, and we're going to be actively recruiting this fall because our last family representative's student has moved on, and so we need to recruit more. So I'm excited for that. But they're a big piece of making this a success, so just want to make sure they're thanked. So last year, next slide, Erin, we had a number of successes in our plan. So the first, I just want to name, this has been a district-wide goal around establishing MTSS systems for academics and clear Tier 2 review teams. So a year ago, we had some things in place academically for literacy, specifically around using DIBELS. But last year was the big year where we spent all our time really honing that system. So not just using DIBELS at our benchmark windows, but having regular progress monitoring windows, not just for students receiving interventions, but for all students at least once every 6 to 8 weeks. So we were awaiting that 12-week window to make sure they were on or off track. It was a way to catch students in between those windows. Also really codifying what it was that we were delivering in our literacy windows. And then our big initiative that I talked to you guys about a year ago was launching what we call priming in our math intervention blocks, which is really following Karen Karps and some other math researchers' research around giving students access points to the conceptual understanding of math that would have come before. The easy way to say this, if a student's in 4th grade learning about fractions, let's look at what they would have learned in 3rd grade that would help them have a point of access in that fractions unit, which was a big deal for staff because it's not a boxed curriculum, and it seems kind of nebulous. It's a very different way of thinking about intervention, but it happened, and we had some pretty positive early results in terms of our Tier 1 assessments because of that access work. A number of teachers came together and made some documents that made it clear what to use and when and where, which was important. But that was a big deal as well. And then last year we started our Tier 2 review teams. And so that was there was a small group of teachers who helped meet with every single classroom teacher and special educator to look at how students were progressing in those interventions and celebrate successes and also brainstorm together when things were not working the way we were hoping they were working. And that allowed us to then elevate a lot of teacher practice because we saw, hey, wow, this kid's really growing in you. What are you doing? And we shared those ideas across classrooms, which was also really powerful. So it's one bullet, but it represents hours of work among the teaching staff. It was a huge win for our school and a system on which we're getting to build as we move into the next So I'm not done yet, Erin. One more. The next piece is our, what was then called the climate team and is being renamed the Tier 1 climate team, is really focused hard on developing a scope and sequence that connected all of the pieces. So as you know, we've spent a lot of time the 2 years prior sort of trying to put some stuff into place for student climate around anti-bullying work, helping kids feel seen work, looking at the different representation of racial groups that our kids come from, and like honoring all of those identities. And we did a lot of things, and then last year was a year where we said, let's put them all in a scope and sequence that sort of build on each other, not just within that grade level, but what happens in fourth, and how does that build in fifth, and really help students, which was a huge piece of work, and it helped link, I think, for kids, our assemblies to the classrooms, to the second step lessons, and really focusing on helping kids feel known, seen, and valued. And we also did some targeted work off our local survey last year, trying to identify where are the places in our school where we still have room to grow. Similar to the district's equity audit work, there are some subgroups in our school that had slightly different experiences, and we spent some time doing focus groups to understand why that might be the case, and then using that information to inform all of us as a learning community about how we can adjust, which was super powerful for all of us, like teachers, staff, united, just to better understand what our kids were experiencing. It has been a big piece of our work in the second half of the year after we learned that information, and is influencing parts of this plan as well. And then there's I snipped a piece of our SQM. So the SEL work was really linking to our district sense of, our district equity statement for students, which is a nice connection. This next piece aligns really nicely to some of the work I know John's doing in his evaluation, but it's also a piece of what we're hoping to experience, which is the student sense of belonging. And so this is about how much kids feel like they're a part of our community. And you can see what they reported in March is pretty positive. That's what that chart is saying. You can see the line purple is to the right of where you would expect it to be, which is improvement from the year before, and I think a large piece of that work. Now you can go, Erin. So then I wanted to show some data. This is the exact 2 slides I shared with staff in our data meeting in May, and I just want to explain a little bit about what we're looking at. So these are DIBELS scores, which is what we use to assess students in literacy. At 4th and 5th grade, we only look at these 3 subcategories. There are many more at the younger grades, but we look at how well a student reads, can they recognize the word sounds, the letter sounds, how fluently they can read, how quickly they can put those sounds together and create words, and then words within a sentence, and the reading comprehension. Do they know what it is the words say? And so at the end of your benchmark, you want kids to be obviously in green and blue. I should tell you that reading accuracy doesn't have a blue, it's just green, but the other 2 have a blue category. And so then on the right, because this chart doesn't show progress over time, I wanted staff to be able to see what happened at beginning of year, mid-year, and end of year. And then the highlighted parts are just some things they were really working intentionally on. We were super proud of our students' accuracy increase in 4th grade to go from 75% at the beginning of the year to 94%, which means we can spend our time spending less on how do you actually read the words to what's happening in the text, which is what you want to be talking about in 4th and 5th grade. And then in 5th grade, Erin, if you want to flip, while we continue to see some strong accuracy holding over, our big excitement was that 90% of or 89% of our students were comprehending at grade level. And so where we spent a lot of time in the 4th and 5th grade standards is what is the author doing when they speak? And then this says that kids are now able to access those conversations because they know what's happening. They know the setting, they know the plot, they can do those sorts of things in the text. And well healthier than the 80% triangle you're always looking for. So I share these successes because they're the work of our team. They were last year's SIP. They also are the baseline for what we're doing this year. I think, Erin, you can go ahead to the next one. One thing we are thinking about is elementary school teachers have to hold it all. They've got to know what's good in literacy, know what's good in math, put it all together, and all in a 40-minute prep period that may or may not be taken by some other thing that you're responsible for, like meeting on a kid. And so it's a lot, and I think what we have seen in the first couple years of implementing a curriculum and implementing MTSS is that, you get better at one of those areas and the other sort of stays stagnant. And then the next year you focus on one of those areas and the other sort of like hangs out there, and like you're progressively getting better over time, but it's hard to do both at the same time. And so what we've begun to think about is how do we help all of ourselves translate the skills we're learning in terms of teaching and students and literacy, for example, and translate that to math and then vice versa. So it feels less like two things. We've also been using the curriculum long enough to know sort of like what's expected in the box and how do we get better at it. So that was definitely a balance in the last year. I think we're in a place to sort of, we're doing less teetering now. Like we know what CKA are, we know what IM are, we have the materials. And then always the challenge is, just responding to the student need and data in front of you and making sure we're responsive to kids. Go ahead, Erin. So in this next step, what we're thinking about is, now that we know all the things, how are we constantly thinking about tier 1 for all? We've done some baseline work around helping create some materials around accommodations so that all kids are accessing. We created the schedule, we put all the kids in the room, and now like how do we help them thrive in that space? And we started some of that work already, but that's going to be a big part of this SIP, is making sure all of our kids, no matter their ability level or background or whatever's happened to them in the last year, and like they're having access and success in tier 1, which is like where everyone is. We also, in alignment with the district shifts that you've probably heard John talk about, are working on aligning our tier 1 through 3 teams, shifting the names, making sure the scope of work makes sense so that we're all looking at the right data and having the right conversations to continue to thrive. And then in terms of our curriculum and instruction, I think we're in the place to begin some honing and some tweaking, which is what you'll see in this plan. Go ahead, Erin. One more back. Thanks. So what you'll see is the same 5 goals from last year, but with different initiatives in them, because I don't think we're in a place of being able to move away from some of our big work, but we are ready to say, okay, we've taken the first swipe at it, let's get more precise and specific. So I won't read all these to you because you have them, but I would say the big piece of this work is continuing to utilize our instructional materials to provide access for all. A lot in alignment with most schools in the district, we've been using the TRUE framework as a way to have a common language around instruction that's, gen ed, special ed, related arts, related service providers, all the things, and not be tied to evaluation. And so what's nice about the TRUE framework is it's really about student engagement and student demand, cognitive demand. And so in the last plan, we were thinking about equitable access to content and agency and identity. And our staff came together and said, I think we've done a lot of work on that, but we need to hang on to the equitable access to content for all the reasons I've already shared. But we need to also, we're ready to shift away a little bit about identity. We've done a lot of work on that. We can't let it go, but we're ready to spend a priority session thinking about cognitive demand and really with this honed in idea of accessibility to all. Last year we called that brown because it made brown, and turns out the 2 new colors in the TRUE framework are also brown. So if you hear on the staff saying brown 2.0, that's why. It's not a cool way to say it, but that's what we've got. But we did do a lot of work tied to it that's not even represented in the plan in terms of every single teacher in my building, including our related service providers, did peer observations with each other throughout the year related to the TRUE framework. And so we're all thinking about, and we're doing the same thing this year, how much of the cognitive load are kids owning and who has access to it in class. So goal number 2 is around climate and culture. And so what we saw in the SQM data that you have seen, what we saw last year in our local data, and what I anticipate we'll see when it's unembargoed in our local data, is some positive movement in our overall climate experience. What we're thinking about now, though, is are we having a positive climate experience for every child, and every child experiencing our school in a positive way? What we know is true from cases is that our students in special populations are struggling to identify both when they're being bullied, but also what actions they have that might make other people feel like they're being bullied. And I would say 85% of the time, super unintentionally. And so we know we need to do some work on just helping navigate communication, social skills, et cetera, so that on both sides, people feel like they're supported and safe at school. And so I think we're continue our tier 1 access anti-bullying work. I think that's just, you're working with kids, you need to keep doing it, but I think our focus will be on how do we equip and give kids some skills around trickier conversations. And then our third goal of 5, we're making our way through, is thinking about MTSS. So the place where I would say this year we're going to continue the work we did last year around our systems. I think they're good systems, but they're still new. And thinking a lot about how we take that same academic system and put it into our social emotional support system. So it's summer, so we've created a lot of things that look good. We'll see how they turn out, but our hope is to be able to use the same pattern of conversations at the 6 to 8 week mark and 12 week mark to identify how students are doing, what is their data that we have a lot of, think like My Savers. We have a lot of data about how kids feel about school. Can we use that to design instruction? Right now, if you get in a tier 2 intervention with our counselor, you live there forever. And Ms. Primo is the best. And we want to make sure she can support lots of kids and that kids can feel success and know they have skills and move on. And so that's a lot of our work is sort of managing how do we transition in and how do we transition out so that kids feel safe, seen, and valued, but also equipped to do the things they want to do. And then the next goal is around communication. And I would say most of these bullets are the same as last year, but I still feel like they're important, which is in terms of thinking about two-way communication. Some of this is around our teams in the district, which, you know, the priority around teams shift over time. So we had ELA and math curriculum councils before, now health curriculum councils there. So we're making sure that communication, that looks different. I have one health teacher who's on the committee, whereas when it was like, you know, 14 math teachers and I have one on the committee, it looks different, but still thinking about how we share communication and information. But it's also about our communication with families and making sure that they feel like they know what's going on in the building, celebrating successes, and also continuing the efforts I started 2 years ago, and intentional reaching out to people who are in more marginalized communities and making sure that I'm not waiting for them to reach out to the school, but they're hearing from me about opportunities to connect. Continue on that, like how am I honing in to make sure everyone feels valued. And lastly, teams and leadership. And so some of this is about helping restructure the teams. You heard me talk about that earlier. And then all of it is about elevating teachers in different ways. I would say the place that I'm thinking about a lot is we have the stipend of teams that everyone has in elementary. They're listed there. But as evidenced by Kristen and Lauren before her, I'm trying to think really hard about how I equip the leaders in my building, whether they want to become principals or curriculum leaders or just like want an experience of being able to lead their peers. And maybe they're not ready to take on a 500-hour internship. You're amazing. But maybe they just want to say, I have this idea, how do I make it happen? And elevating those. So these are the formal things, but I would say I'm also thinking about the informal so that people feel as adults in our community, they have spaces to lead as well. And that's the end of my formal presentation. Do you have questions for me?
I just want to say what I thought was so powerful in the beginning when you're talking that you want the students and it seems like your faculty to feel that they are known, seen, and valued. I think that's, as a manager, as a principal, that's your goal. That's a home run right there. Great job, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's very informative. Another question for Misty? All right.
No, I'm amazed that you could get through the year and get through this in addition to it. I know how much work that is.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Yeah, Cheryl is very uniquely qualified.
Yeah, she understands very acutely. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, and thank you, staff, for their hard work.
100%.
So we will continue with the discussion about the Wilbraham Select Board's request to meet. John?
I didn't get any notification on this. Is this something they sent to John or to you, or?
There's the letter in fact. Is that? Okay. Then let me read the letter. Just want to make sure I get the right thing. This, this is a letter dated This is a letter dated August 14th from Michael Squindo. It says, the Wilbraham Select Board requests an opportunity to meet with the Hampden-Wilbraham Regional School Committee. The Select Board is amenable to attending a meeting of the school committee or to hosting the school committee at a Select Board meeting. The Select Board wants to discuss the budget process for FY27. Specifically, the Select Board wants to understand how the school committee views the impact on the budget process following the document issued by DESE dated March 25th. This is the document on which the Wilbraham Town Council, Brian Winner, provided his opinion to the Select Board. The main question is, how does the school committee intend to seek guidance and input from the Finance Committee prior to providing an assessment figure to member communities? The Select Board also wants to discuss the capital planning process for both district properties and the town-owned properties. The Select Board and Finance Committee have concerns about the capital projects for the district properties as to whether or not they will be discussed with them or simply presented as a figure. They also want to discuss the process for consideration of capital projects for town-owned properties, especially regarding the accuracy of cost estimates and, in particular cases, the efficacy or other ramifications of the projects themselves. The Select Board would like to schedule the meeting for mid-September, if at all possible. Thank you for your consideration. Sincerely, Select Board, Michael A. Squindo, Chair. Sorry, that wasn't in the packet.
If I may start with this, how we view the documents, I think we made that clear, but we have no problem with meeting and talking with them. How we deal with FinCom, that's been an ongoing evolution, but it seems like there's this idea in Wilbraham town governance that we can here's our capital projects, we're just going to throw them out at you, and you guys have to fund them, or it's going to go on the budget. We have several conversations back and forth, right? We have meetings with capital, we have meetings with FinCom to see, what can we do? Here's what we'd like to do this year. What can we do this year? Here's what we put as tier 1, tier 2. We divided up so many different ways. So and I don't think that's really changed, has it? I mean, we haven't really deviated from that, right? Anybody?
In principle, I agree with you, Sean. I don't know, I'm starting to get the feeling like, I mean, we show up with the bill, right? And nobody likes the people who show up with the bill. And we have the biggest bill for each town. You know, each town contributes well more than half of their tax revenue to the school district, which is wonderful that they prioritize the kids and they support the kids, and we have a phenomenal school district. And Wilbraham in particular was just recently recognized as a really great place to live, not just on the state scale, but on the national scale. And, you know, schools are a huge part of that kind of stuff. But I just, you know, costs go up, there's an increase every year, and you know, I would love nothing more than to present to FinCom, present to the select board, hey, guess what, guys? No change in the budget this year. Right? I think most of us would love to present that, but it's not reality. You know, I don't like getting the bill when my car gets repaired. You know, I don't like getting the bill when a big face of the house has to have rotted wood replaced and repainted. I don't think any of us do, and you know, so I mean, I share your sentiment, Sean, that I think it'd be great to meet with them. If we were, I would love for it to be September 10th, because I'm going to be remote on September 25th because I'm traveling for a meeting. That's my own personal, though. You guys are all, you know, just as important as me. So if the 25th is what works better for everybody else, obviously, that's fine. And I'd love to talk to them. And one of the other disconnects that I think I realize is, like, we tend to talk about the capital. We start talking about the capital in the fall because we don't have all the numbers for the operating budget, right? Until we hear from the states and all that kind of stuff. But Wilbraham doesn't even have the members for the capital review committee picked, like at the time that, you know, like last fall, one of our few finance and operation subcommittee meetings, you know, the first one, we talked about capital, and what we thought was short-term and long-term plans, and it was great. And there was a representative from FinCom there who sits on, and from Hamden Advisory. But at that time of the year, they hadn't even picked who sits on the capital review committee. And you know, and you're absolutely right, Sean. Everything's presented and had been discussed in multiple public meetings, and then there's still this impression, you know, at the end of, you know, at the end of the gourmet meal, the check comes. What? We didn't have 10 bottles of champagne. What? You know. So all we can do, I think, is to try to be as open and transparent as we can, and to try to remember that there are neighbors, and you know, and work together to do the best we can to advocate for the kids, but also to advocate for the taxpayers by doing what we can to keep costs under control. All right.
Just two more points I have on this is, when you talk about where that letter talks about the accuracy of our cost projections, if you look at that, like, it takes a lot of energy and time to put together a cost projection. And then if we say, okay, we're going to do it now, we're going to do it next year, when are we going to do it? So you're kind of getting these ranges, right? We don't have an exact number, because if we get an exact number this year, they decide not to do it this year. Let's take a perfect example, the replacement of the seating in the alumni stadium there. Well, it was 9 years ago, we put that forward, and then each year it gets getting kicked down the line. If we spend the time to really update every single quote every year to get it so it's ready to go, it's just a lot of energy and a lot of time. So we do try to come up with accuracy, and then when we know where they're saying, okay, let's do this project, then we can sharpen our pencils and fine tune things. But I understand that frustration, but it's nature, unfortunately, of the beast. And then the last thing I'll say on this is, I would highly recommend us to go to them, to one of their meetings. Instead of having them come here, let us go to them. That's all, thank you.
I like the sentiment, Sean, but from a practicality standpoint, they have a teeny tiny room, and we have a really big room. So it might be logistically challenging, but I'm happy to go along with that in sentiment. The other thing is when this meeting gets set, assuming the rest of the committee wants to meet with them, I think it would be very good for it to be a working meeting. We should have an agenda of actual items we want to discuss with them. For instance, the bleachers, right? You know, quote for replacement. I know that the Wilbraham engineer came by and said they're not about ready to fall over. That's great, but that doesn't mean that they're safe. There's splinters, broken plastic, and people are still at risk. You know, so it was only 4 years ago, the school committee, I think, spent a really big chunk of change fixing them up, and it only got us 4 years, right? I mean, wasn't it like $250,000 at least, Sean? I can't remember the exact amount. So I, like at that meeting, I think it would be great to present, okay, this number of years ago, we spent this amount of money, and now here we are, we probably need to spend and have a little bit of an estimate for, okay, now Y amount of money to fix it up again versus what the cost for replacement would be. And then, but it's enough, like, engage them in the discussion. Which way do you guys want to go? Of course, we can't leave Hamden out of that, right? But probably it would be better to meet with Wilbraham first and then meet with Hamden Select Board at another meeting. Because having everybody all together, I just don't want it to be a meeting talking about meetings. I think there should be an agenda of actual items to talk about, what we think is for capital and stuff like that. We can also talk about meetings, but it shouldn't be only a meeting about meetings.
I get the sense, I'm not the expert in the Wilbraham Finance Committee, you guys are, but I got the sense that this goes back to, was it this year or last year, where they put their number up instead of our number up before town meeting? And from what I read with that document, that if that happens again, our number has to go up, not their number. So it sounds to me like they're just more interested in how are we going to use that quote-unquote newfound power of ours, that our number goes regardless of what they say, and how are we going to work with them and compromise with them. That's what this sounds like, at least when I put the two things together, not specifics, not like this bleachers or that. They just want to know, are we going to work with them, or are we just going to impose our will?
So that was also my takeaway from the letter. It stated asking about how we were what the budget process for FY27 was going to look like. So that sounds like a conversation to be had. So because we are partners with both towns. And then asking also, how does the school committee intend to seek guidance from Finance Committee and Capital? Again, understanding the process before we embark upon the budget season, making sure that we are transparent, making sure that we're on the same page. We can be saying something, if we believe that we mean something, if the information is not being received that way, we may need to look at how we're presenting the information and the words that we're saying. So I think it really is important for us to be in more regular conversation and communication and transparent with the governing bodies in both towns and determining what do we want our process to look like. And I think, yes, we've had, contentious budget seasons, but we are going to be embarking on a new budget season. We want to look at how we can do it better. What does that look like? What will our ask be? How would you like this handled when we present bids on something? What is the process going to look like? So anyway, that was my takeaway from what we'll be doing for that. And then also because of the information from Desi, asking, are we just going to be presenting a number, or will there continue to be a discussion and conversation and working together to be able to come to and reach common ground?
If I can build on something that Mike had just said too, there is a cost to not doing projects. There is a cost to kicking them down the road. For example, let's just stay on what you were saying about the bleachers, right? Each year we're taking them apart, we're cleaning them, we're putting them back together, we're tightening things. How much time? What is the cost? What is the process? How much does that cost each year? Plus that money that we put to extend things. I think it was, Mike, I thought it was $325,000. That's the number that's in my head. But
I couldn't remember the exact number.
It was something like that.
I remember it was a big number. I wasn't on the committee at the time, but I was at the meeting when you guys voted to fund it. I think you funded it from, either you funded it from E&D or from the stabilization fund, which no longer exists.
Right.
because it's been depleted, but it was a lot of money.
Yeah, John, if we could have that, like if we could just say, listen, this is how much it's cost us not to redo the bleachers, for an example, just to let them know. And if we have other examples too, other things that were kicked down the line, you know, the routers in the different buildings, such like that, to say, what's the actual cost of us not doing this? Because there is a cost. I think it'd be helpful for both sides. Thank you.
I only wanted to say one thing about your use of the word ask, and it touches on one of the challenges that I think we face. I think for like the last decade, all the school committee has ever asked for is, can we please just not have to make cuts? Right? We haven't asked to add another building to the district. We haven't asked to double the number of teachers or have a 20% increase in number. All we've done is ask if we could please just not have to make cuts. And every year the answer to that was no. And every year cuts were made, including last year, to the point where things are down to the line. I think that some people think that it's a negotiation, but sure, there's fine, we can have a negotiation back and forth, but for us it's not dollars, it's teachers, programs, sports, music. I mean that's what sure, they're talking about dollars, but for us, we don't have a big piggy bank full of dollars, right? It's okay, what's getting cut this year? What's on the chopping block? And that's how it's been every year, I think, for the last decade. And if you look at while both towns do put a substantial amount of their tax revenue to the schools, the percent of the town budget that has gone to the schools has gone down every year over the last decade. So while they do generously support the towns, the schools, it has been less generous year after year. Okay, sorry.
I just wanted to share an observation and a question, because I know the committee works extensively to demonstrate equal commitment to both communities, as do I as superintendent. I wonder how this looks to Hamden if there's a meeting between the select board and the school committee to find out, to just quote the letter, how the school committee plans to work with the Wilbraham FinCom on developing the budget.
And I think we should meet with advisory as well, or the Hamden Select Board, and have this conversation with them as well. I think that would be amazing.
It might be helpful to meet all together now that I think about it, because I'm not sure Hamden shares the thought that there's as big a problem as Wilbraham does.
And also, do we have an answer to that question that Sean just asked? How are we going to work with advisory? When it comes down to, push comes to shove, we're going to say, this is what we're going to present to the, if they say, nope, we're not spending it, we say, we're going to present our number of town meeting, or what is it going to be our approach? Before we discuss it, we need to have an approach that we.
I mean, this year I thought was a great year for communication, even though they didn't. I mean, multiple times we said, this is where we are. They said, okay, this is what we hope it's going to be. And we're like, well, we don't want to have to close, 2 buildings. And multiple times of the year, we went back, we said where the numbers were, and the numbers do develop over the year. And then the school committee voted the number. We did our elected duty. We voted the school budget. FinCom voted to not recommend it. We met and we cut the budget, or we added additional subsidy from E&D, and which has created a big hole that we have this year. And then FinCom re-voted to recommend the budget. And I think that the bottom line is what Desi says is the school committee is elected to, put forward the budget, and then, if FinCom and Hamden Advisory vote to not support that budget, after we've had all these back and forth conversations together, it shouldn't be a surprise where it is, then we have to make a decision if we think we should cut more stuff to drop it, or go to town meeting with our number, knowing that FinCom or Hampton Advisory will stand up and say that they don't support the budget, and this is why, and so forth.
What would you have done this past year if Jesse had made this record, their interpretation before it? Would we have still done the compromise and cut and done the ED, or would we have said we're going to the, taking them for a town meeting? That's really what we're asking ourselves then. What would we have done, and what are we going to do next year?
I thought that this year was an ideal year, and my hope would be, even better if we voted a budget and they agreed to it. But we should have the discussion with them. It might not be entirely clear to us what their hopes and expectations are.
We've had this discussion regarding what number goes on the warrant for the towns. So this was not the first year this has happened. This is an ongoing conversation, and I think there's just a difference of opinion. And so I'll leave it at that. So this was not the first year that has occurred. It's happened in the past. And the second piece is I do also, as I stated before, we have both towns that we're partnering with. So it's important that all parties are at the table and having the conversation, because we can't come to an agreement with one town and then go back and say, well, we've already agreed on that, so what do you think? That doesn't sound very fair.
I don't mind having a meeting, but I still think Hamden should be included in that meeting. And I think we should have an agenda and have answers for the questions that were in the email. And and kind of having like a representative answer those questions instead of like everybody talking all at once and saying different things. So I'm guessing that John and Doug and everybody had opinions on how to answer some of those questions when you read them. I don't know, I'm just thinking, actually, I think we're kind of all on the same page of like transparency and meeting and trying to work together. I don't think that's changed because of this.
And I think we also, it's kind of links to it, but just how we're using the budget in Finance Committee, because it seemed that we did fall off and then we weren't having those regular conversations and discussions where they could bring it back to their board. So I think that could potentially assist in transparency and communication and understanding between the three groups. So it sounds like we're interested in meeting. So everyone has the calendar of our September meeting, so we have.
I'm interested in meeting, but I still want to make sure Hamden is invited to that meeting too.
Sure.
We don't want them to think we're discussing things without them. Yeah.
And I would think,
This would be something we would be asking, but I guess before we reach out to the town, I'd like to see who's available on the school
also,
committee.
before we meet, should we have a strategy plan? So we know what the answers to these questions are that they're asking us before we meet?
As I was taking notes, it seems like there are at least 3 decision points in parts of the process here. I imagine that in the end, it's going to be some direction to me the right response or to the chair the right response. But I think the first question is whether or not Hamden will be invited to the meeting, or it would be the school committee's desire to invite Hamden to the meeting.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
They are equal shareholders.
The second is about the process for developing the agenda. Obviously, items on the letter would have to be on the agenda,
Yes.
but there has to be some kind of way to decide what else we should put on the agenda so that it doesn't become, as Dr. Terrasi said, a meeting about meetings.
Should we share that letter with the Hamden Select Board so that they know what they have asked of us and what we're inviting them to?
Could you also share it with the committee?
Sounds reasonable.
So any thoughts on how?
I would like to
the agenda?
propose to have a list of what we expect to be capital expenses for the regional building and regional properties, since we'll have both select boards there.
do we want to meet with the Budget and Finance Subcommittee and come up with the answers and the proposals with ourselves and the representatives from each of the towns, come up with the questions and the agenda? Is that something that would be helpful or not?
May be hard to have that happen in time to have a meeting in September, which is what the Wilbraham Select Board wanted, but
I think first, though, that our school committee, and I don't have an answer because I'm open to anything, how the answers to the questions, that we have to get our own act together and say, this is how we intend to proceed, this is how we intend to negotiate, and then we can have a meeting and we'll go forward with what we decide.
I think we kind of said that though, right?
Yes.
How we would proceed, we kind of said that, we're still being transparent in the meetings and trying to work out a budget that works for both towns and for the students in the district. So I would guess like answering those questions, add what Mike said, and then Sean, you want to see if those two boards wanted anything on the agenda?
So one option would be to have the subcommittee review the draft agenda based on the conversation tonight, send it to, as part of the communication to both select boards along with the original letter. Ask if, they had any additional items they wanted to have added, and then put that all together into a final agenda.
So the subcommittee would approve the agenda, then that would then have to be approved by the school committee before the meeting, is that?
No, just to have the subcommittee, to have a group look over what's going on in the agenda to make sure that it seems right. Then send it to the select boards of both communities and see if they see anything that's missing from what they're wanting to talk about. And then that would become the agenda that we post for, I guess, maybe that becomes the entire school committee for September 11th.
let me ask this question to the committee. Does anyone think it's a bad idea to discuss expected capital expenses for the regional building at the meeting?
I think what we're talking right now and what the letter is more of like, what is the process going to be?
It's a process.
And what are the expectations will be when it comes to how we present the capital projects and the accuracy of the cost projections and such, and how the whole process runs. Once we have the process down and we're all in agreement, here's the steps that we will follow, here's what we will do, then I think it will be, we could start into, interjecting numbers and stuff into it. I think it might be premature, but that's my own personal opinion.
My
All
concern,
right, do you think it's a bad idea?
Doug, do you have something to say? It looks like Doug has
Huh?
something.
Well, so all of that would just be a meeting about meetings. If we have them all together, we should talk about stuff that's relevant to all of them. So that would be regional capital expenses. We won't have any, we have a number. I think we need to engage them in a conversation about the bleachers. Okay? We've got an estimate and we've got a plan for replacement of the bleachers, which members of the select board say they've never seen or heard, which I think aren't true because I remember public meetings where you showed it, and there's pictures and diagrams and stuff like that, but people only remember about 10% of what you tell them. So at least that's what they tell us in medical school. So you just got to repeat stuff. Patients over and over again. So talk about that, and then, now that the engineer says it's structurally sound, an alternative presentation, where, okay, if we're gonna fix them up, X cost, and, then the facts from the last repair job and stuff, to open a discussion with the towns. What do you guys wanna do with the bleachers? You wanna go on a 3-year savings plan to replace them, or do you wanna fix them up again, knowing that we're probably gonna have to spend another $750,000 to fix them up again in 4 years again? So just kind of, I see that meeting as an opportunity to open a dialogue for a really big issue that has been kicked down the road and could be an example and a practice exercise as to how to go forward with things. So it's good to have a practice, like a workbook, right? A practice exercise. If you go through the principles, then you do the problems, and then, right? So anyway, that's my thought. But
Doug, what did you want to say?
I just think I think the challenge for me, I think, I'll just say, relative to sort of capital expenses for an earlier part of September is to have much detail. I think we can talk in broad terms and talk to some thematic approach to some of it. I think having very solid numbers will be a challenge to have ready by that point, but at the same time, we could have sort of order of magnitude type numbers, I think, but I think that getting more precise with the asks is going to be a little challenging to do it that quick. Later in September, then we could be a little more precise, but I think it's an opportunity to still talk about approach and the mechanics of approach and what's possible and what their needs are in that regard.
So can we have a subcommittee come up with an agenda and send a letter? Is that what we're deciding right now?
That is what we were discussing.
Okay, can we do that, please?
Tim was just going to make a comment. He has not spoken yet.
Well, my major concern was the two safety issues. I feel a little more comfortable that the person from facilities from the town says it's structurally sound. But he laid out 3 different things that have to happen for it to continue to be structurally sound. I don't know if they priced those, but they laid out. My concern is the air in the middle school. And I went and talked to the town manager about what do I have to do? How many signatures do I have to collect to have a special town meeting? But that's an issue that I'm very concerned about. It's not healthy. Now, I misspoke and had a brain fart and said carbon monoxide instead of carbon dioxide, and they all went ballistic. But the fact of the matter is, if anybody remembers Apollo 13, the problem that was facing those astronauts was the buildup of carbon dioxide that really affected their thinking. They're in a closed, contained area, and if you're not bringing in fresh air, which is what the units are supposed to be doing, we've had that problem for over a decade. So I don't want to abandon my plan to collect signatures and fix that problem. It's a health issue for not only for our students, but for our employees. So I want to move forward with that. And I think the reason they're willing to talk to us is because of that. They know that if we go into a town meeting and say, your children and our teachers and our employees' health is in danger for a problem we've been aware of for a decade, and we've done nothing about it. I think if we collect those signatures and we have the town meeting, they'll come up with a way to fix that problem. We have an obligation to the students and our employees to have a safe, healthy environment. I'm not giving up on that. And my thought on the budget is I will not vote for a budget that's going to cut services to our children. We have a good school system, but it's been chipped away at, as been explained here, a number of times. Where do we draw the line? So I just wanted to make that clear. I'm all in favor of bringing the towns together, because what I'm hearing is that there's a lot of mistrust between this body and those select boards, or at least our select board in Wilbraham. I don't know what the Hamden people are feeling about this, but there's serious mistrust. They think we're padding our budget. Well, you look at the budget and you show me where it's padded. We have positions for kids with special needs that we haven't filled. You know, I came here to fight for the kids and quality education, and that's what I intend to do. And I'm not going to vote for a budget that is going to cut any more from our schools.
So what I get Tim saying is that if it came down to push comes to shove, Wilbraham Finance Committee says, nope, you have to cut, and we say, we don't want to cut, and we're going to say, basically, we're going to bring it before the town meeting, our number, regardless of what you said, which I wouldn't be opposed to that. So I think that's what that letter's asking. What would we do if this push comes to shove? I think we should first try to compromise, we should try to work with them, but if they don't want to work with us, I think we would use I would vote to use our, what Desi said we could use, and bring our numbers to town meeting and try to convince the town to vote for what we think is right for the kids.
I think when it comes down to it, we don't want to have to battle the towns. They are our partners in this. And if we can find out a way that we can all agree with and move forward with that, with respect from the beginning, with an understanding, with trust, and build on that, I think that's important. I think we don't need to get while we're all there, let's throw this at them. We're not even sure what's going to come out of that meeting. I say, let's follow the process, let's follow the recommendation, have the meeting. Unfortunately, like you said, talk about the meetings, how we're going to move forward, all get on the same page in a public meeting, all agree, and then follow those steps.
I agree, and not worry about the battle unless the need arises.
If we do it right, we're not going to have to battle.
So does it sound reasonable to, so the letter will be shared with the committee, reaching out to the town of Camden to see if they were interested in attending a tri-board meeting. Dr. Burles and Dr. Slaughter will do a draft agenda for the subcommittee to then add on to, along with representatives from whoever is also part of the budget subcommittee, and then sharing the agenda, and then coming up with a date for if all parties are interested in meeting.
If we're going to do this as an entire committee, why do we also do it in, the only reason I was suggesting doing it in a subcommittee is to move faster with it. But if it has to come back to the full committee, let's just deal with the full committee, right? Why do it twice?
Does that sound reasonable? What the process? Does the committee agree to that?
I'm confused what you guys are saying right now. Were we gonna go forward with the meeting with the towns with what the subcommittee decides, or the subcommittee was gonna then vote on something that the school committee was gonna?
No, so what would happen is we'll first reach out to the town of Camden and see if they're interested in it and being part of the tri-board meeting, essentially, to discuss this. Then John and Doug will draft an agenda for the school committee we can do that at our next meeting, go through and make sure that we're covering the topics that we were interested in covering, and then sharing it with the towns, and then setting the date at that point.
Would you be able to talk to the select boards while you're creating that agenda to make sure anything that they want on there is also on there as well? So it's representative of all three political bodies. That would be great. Other than that, that's fine. If for my own, I say great.
I think just based on time, so because our next meeting is September 10th.
Yep.
And it's the 21st.
Now, I have a question to ask off of Tim's statement, and I think he animately describes the concern that we all have about the air handlers in the middle school, because that was one of two things we thought were a safety issue to be presented at fall town meeting. Since we have received notification that Wilbraham's not currently planning on a fall town meeting, has the school committee or John made an official request to the Wilbraham Select Board that we think that there is a need for a fall town meeting that has been denied?
Or we can move to it now, I guess. Can we hold?
Yeah, I know what you're talking
Thank
about.
you.
I went through the agenda.
Thank you.
So,
That's a great
I
question.
didn't say, can we ask them? I'm just curious, have we asked them yet? And I guess the answer to that is no, but it could change.
To answer the question now, although I'm sure we'll have a more full discussion later, we have shared some information with the representative from the planning committee that he was going to get some information, he was going to share with the board and then get back to us. Specifically, that the new regulations that the board is going to be adopting will not have a major impact on our regional agreement. So we won't be dealing with the delays that we thought we were dealing with.
I'm concerned because I think we have a lot of skirting around issues when one person goes to talk to another person, as opposed to a certified letter from the Hampton-Wilbraham Regional School District requesting a fall town meeting for these reasons sent to the Wilbraham Select Board and town administrators.
I do not believe we've made a formal request. Therefore, we've not
If
received
the
a
committee
formal
thinks that
denial.
we should have, well, after all of our discussions today, that might be something we consider doing.
Great question.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone's okay to move on?
Yep.
So we will continue with old business. So the district review self-assessment indicators.
I did receive some suggested narrative content, which I tried my best to blend together. So here is a draft narrative for that first item, which has to do with school committee, for your consideration. While it's going around, I'll read it just for those watching at home. The school committee has established systems for policy review and for conducting the superintendent's evaluation and has begun to use the data more deliberately to inform decisions. In recent meeting, members have engaged in reviewing equity implications of policies and resource allocations, making intentional shifts toward addressing disparities for historically underserved students. We've also expanded our efforts at community engagement through public comment opportunities and transparent, accessible communication via the district website and community-wide emails. Consistent outreach across all stakeholder groups remains an area of growth. The school committee works to align budget allocations with the district's strategic goals and has begun to analyze those allocations through an equity lens across schools. We also recognize the need to strengthen processes in collective bargaining to advance workforce diversity and ensure fair compensation standards for all non-bargained staff. The school committee believes that a child's educational journey is a shared responsibility and is deeply committed to working in partnership with parents and caregivers. It is dedicated to building a school community where every family feels heard, respected, and empowered to be an active participant in their child's success. This includes an explicit commitment to working to remove barriers that have impacted certain communities and groups, as evidenced in the committee's decision to conduct an equity audit and adopt a vision of equity statement. As an area of continuous improvement, the school committee is committed to building consistency and further developing systems and practices that strengthen community input, relationships with local governing bodies and stakeholders, equity-focused resource allocation, and effective governance.
Great.
Awesome.
Do you remember?
The only suggestion I might make is perhaps the last paragraph should be the first one, because the first sentence in the last paragraph is kind of a nice introductory sentence. But
I can do that. If you want.
that depends on what the committee thinks. Otherwise, I think all of this is nice.
I was looking at this as more of like a SWOT analysis. Do you guys remember that from back in the day? You know, your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats and stuff, and putting different things. And that was, that was more of like a exercise that everyone would get together and we would just go through different things and put things in the different buckets and see where we want to go. I had some more like opportunities and threats and stuff that I had. Then what's listed here is great. I don't know, is that something that we want to bring up in this assessment, or is that something that's not needed?
It's the committee's own statement. As far as I'm concerned, you can write whatever you want in here.
What effect does that have? What impact is the impact?
The impact will be that you'd be more likely to ask to just explain that when you have your interviews.
Would the committee like to include those or not?
Can you remind us who's interviewing us?
You'll be interviewed by a team of researchers from AIR, American Institutes for Educational Research.
Maybe it should be shorter.
I think the short.
Yeah. Having been interviewed by Desi before on other things, shorter is better.
That's fine.
Okay, well, it looks like this is a vote. If people are comfortable voting,
Yep.
would someone be willing to make a motion?
Motion to accept the draft narrative that we just had read out loud to us. Yes.
Nice clarification on the motion. Is that with the last paragraph moved to the front? Or keep it as is?
You're making a motion.
Okay, with the last paragraph moved to the front.
Second.
Second.
Okay, any questions or discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries 6-1.
And so the other thing we need on this is a rating to remind you that the 4 levels are not well at all, somewhat well, well, or very well.
Well,
Well, then they can tell us what we need to
impact
improve.
Same as I said before.
Well,
4+.
they're going to give us stuff to improve, no matter what we say. So
Well,
I'm saying well, because they're gonna tell us how to improve.
Man, we're gonna be really old buddy-buddy with everyone at DESI after this, huh? They're gonna know what we all look like. They're gonna know us by name.
Okay, so we'll continue with the review of regional agreement sections regarding transfers.
Okay. So, calling your attention to the most current version of the regional agreement, page 3, section D, exceptions is where the transfer language resides. There was some discussion about maybe wanting to revise this to address the issue that under the current version of the agreement, all Hampden residents are required to request a transfer to Wilbraham if they want their students to be educated beyond grade 5, even though there's no option for them to be educated beyond grade 5 in their hometown. Which then results in the school committee have to consider all those transfer requests.
Can you just say that again in a different way? It seems to me like you're saying that we should, that it's going to be a requirement of Hampden to request for each child?
What I'm saying is that's currently the requirement. And
Right.
the question was, do we want to make a modification to the regional agreement so that that doesn't continue to be the case?
I thought that we were that we were going to regionalize K through 5, right? Sorry, K through 4 stays to the town, and then 5 through 12 is regionalized. Instead of it being, what is it now, 6 through 12?
That was what we were doing at one point, but essentially what this agreement does is try to codify the status quo, which is that students are educated in WMS. It says that residents of member towns in grades 6 through 8 shall attend schools, you're correct, within the district as designated by the committee. So the committee could eliminate that requirement based on that sentence. But I think there still was a desire, if I remember correctly from one of the prior meetings, to revisit this issue of transfer requests, which I guess at that point would only be for elementary students.
Which specific number are you talking about here, John?
It's
You said under D exceptions?
under D, I think it is number 2.
Number 2. So you're not looking for endorsement of what this says, you're asking if we want to change what it already says?
Correct. So, right, it would be, students may also be accommodated in other schools when approved by the child's parents, guardians, and the committee, provided that the committee determines such an assignment, a reassignment is approved and can be accomplished in the best interest.
So if you just look back on how many times we've used this for something that did not include the middle school, it's, I mean, how many times on each hand, maybe a year.
And you don't want school committee to be replaced by superintendent, Denise?
On this, I don't have an opinion. The reason it's come back is because folks have said, well, maybe we should reconsider this.
I think it's important that there's still a mechanism so that it's future-proof, right? Like 10 years ago, I'm not sure we would have predicted that the middle school in Hamden needed to be closed, right? So we don't know what the future is. I think there needs to be a mechanism, whether it should say the committee determines or superintendent. You know, we could just replace committee with superintendent, you know, unless you think it's going to put your, you know, or a future superintendent's head in an very unduly uncomfortable position.
You know, obviously the decider always has the most political pressure. And honestly, I truly don't have an opinion, but this is something that goes back and forth. Should the committee do it? Should the committee delegate it to the superintendent? It's truly up to you. But I think it's only coming back on the agenda because there was a discussion at the last round of these approvals of whether it should stay with the committee or whether it should go to the superintendent.
From the perspective of getting the towns to agree to it, do you think that the towns would be more comfortable having the committee's name there, knowing that the committee is elected, or the superintendent's name? What do you guys think?
I would say that keeping it with the school committee.
Keeping with the committee?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, from that perspective.
We are the elected representatives of the town, and we would control this. And I think it's putting too much pressure. If you remember, no, I'm sorry. We've been on, those who've been on the committee, Cheryl knows, Michelle knows, right? Right, there was a lot of pressure on us, and I wouldn't want that pressure to be on John or any future superintendent.
I'm confused. We're talking about grade 5?
Well, no, this would come into play for a student in a grade 4 or below. So right now, the statement looks like the child's parents could make a request, like let's say there's a Wilbraham family that lives one door, is on Main Street there, one door, one house away from the Hamden line, and they might choose to make a request. We'd like to request that our child go to Green Meadows instead of,
Actually,
Wilbraham for grade school, and that's something that could be considered and discussed and then decided depending on the merits of the request and circumstances and classroom availability and all that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
Mike, sorry, forgive me for interrupting. Like a real life example that has repeatedly come up almost every year is a family from Hamden and or Wilbraham moves to the other town. And yet they already have their friends and stuff like that, and they don't necessarily want to move the kids to the different school, and they want them to keep going the way they're going. That seems to be, other than the middle school, that is the most common thing that's asked. And again, keeping that with the school committee keeps the pressure off the superintendent and puts it on us. I feel strongly about it. Oh, by the way, there's a period after "and kept confidential." There should be a period as a comma.
Which is why we
Is
have
there
always
any
do it in
way
executive session.
to change between now and when there is a vote on the revised regional agreement to amend the transfer process?
Anything in this agreement can be changed before the final votes.
So would this include changing the current process that we have in place?
It wouldn't be in effect until after the vote.
Is the only way to effectuate change is for both towns to?
For something that's in the black and white letter of the agreement, the only way is to change the agreement.
What did you want changed?
Currently, Hamden residents have to request that their child be educated beyond 5th grade because there is no educational facility for them in Hamden. So they have to ask for their child to be educated in 6th grade.
I see, you'd like to amend the current agreement, ignoring the,
Correct. Just that it could be at the discretion of the superintendent and/or their designee to allow students in Hamden to flow to 6th grade without permission from the school.
Isn't that what B says, middle school?
no, Michelle's thinking ahead in that if we're lucky, this might go to vote at town meetings in the spring. And it might not even be till the fall after, right? So she's just.
I'm hoping for this fall.
She's.
Or are you kidding?
Okay, I'm with you on that.
She's
And-
hoping for a lot of things this fall.
And
Big dreams.
just like, I'd love it to not snow before December 1st, but you know, we live in New England, who knows? So, yeah, I get what you're saying.
So this B right here is essentially, nobody has to, every kid in grade 5 goes to grade 6 move according to this.
Actually, if I may, you can't change what's black and white here, but if you read this carefully, it doesn't say that parents have to fill out a form and it has to be formally requested. This could be something that we could take the vote and then send it to the parents and then ask them for their approval for it afterwards, rather than having to have it that they come to us first. So if you read this here, it doesn't say that first the parents have to send a letter and they have to give us X, Y, and Z. That's something that we've required to do because when we first did this, because of the middle school issue, we had to do it the same way every way, and it was recommended by the attorneys. So we can keep the language as it is, but we can just change our process to take the onus off the parents in Hamden for requesting and have us send a letter to them saying, your child has been approved to go there and the such, and if they have any questions or whatever, they can come and meet with the committee or reach out and whatever, flip it around a little bit, the process. That is something I think we can do.
So the yellow B is not currently in the agreement. That's
The yellow is in
I'm
there.
not sure we can do that, Sean.
I think we can.
Not until this is passed.
No, this is what's in the agreement, isn't it?
No, this is the new edited version. See all the yellow words and stuff. This is a draft of the amendment to the original agreement. or the
Yeah, but I don't think
changes.
it's changed.
It
D2.
is.
John, has D2 been changed?
D2 is new, anything in yellow is new.
Look at B.
But how,
language is-
what's the present writing? I thought this is very close to the present writing.
Sorry, two people are talking.
Sorry.
I couldn't hear.
If we were going to change the process, we probably need to do it with the advice of council.
So I'm talking about, I guess, on the top of page 3, it's what's currently in the agreement, not one of the modifications that was made.
Right.
Oh, but number 2. It's number 2 on the top of
Right.
page 3.
So-
Students may also be accommodated in other schools within the district when approved by the child's parents, and the school committee provided that the committee determines that such an assignment or reassignment is prudent, can be accomplished, and is in the best interest of the student.
Right, so why don't we start first? And we said, yes, we believe it is prudent and can be accomplished in the best interest of the student for your child to move. Is this something that you agree with, rather than having them initiate it? I'm just trying to meet what your issue was. And as you can see, the language is very similar, but yeah. it still, I think, allows us to do that.
Doesn't letter B make that not necessary?
Based on the history, I feel very
What was that?
strongly we should not change the process without the input of council in executive.
It says letter B
Duly
seems to
noted.
make that not necessary. Letter B says, residents of the member towns in grade 6 to 8 will attend schools within the district as designated by the committee.
That's
So
That's a
new.
change that
That's-
So we're designating everybody can to go to school in Wilbraham.
That is something that has not been voted on by
Right.
both towns or approved.
Michelle was just asking, before this changes, is there something that we can do to change the process so it doesn't put the onus on the Hamden parents to reach out to us and jump through the hoops that we have set?
Isn't this going to be changed before the next time we need it?
But we can make a policy, internal change in the interim until this has been decided that takes the onus off the parents. Let us vote on it, send it to them, and then they can give the approval or not from there.
When this gets voted, that's not necessary.
Then it's not necessary when this gets voted. This is until this gets voted.
Yeah, isn't that, the only time it's needed is next year when they go back to middle school. It's already been done, right? Nobody's applying right now.
You're assuming this is going to pass.
You're assuming this is going to be brought up in the fall.
Right, I mean, we don't know what meeting it's going to be brought up at yet, and we don't know if both towns are going to vote to adopt it.
I'm
So
sorry, I
last
didn't mean to
time
stir
an
up a
amendment
hornet's
to the
nest.
regional agreement
You
went
had a
out,
question,
so
and that was my
it did.
solution.
So Mike is asking, can you ask council if you can do what Sean says with the old language?
If that's the will of the committee, I'm happy to ask that question. I understand the process you're talking about.
Instead of having
Essentially, it would be
parents,
pre-approved.
yes, pre-approved, so they don't have to write a thing and explain why they want their kid to go to the middle school when that's their only option.
So the pre-approval, just to be clear, the school committee is going to pre-approve.
We would vote and pre-approve each student, and then
Right.
we would send the letter to them. But they don't have to do anything.
Right.
They would just get the letter in the mail from us, and then they can decide what to do from there.
I'm not.
The way I envisioned it would not be for each student. It would be a vote that all students currently enrolled in grade 5 are approved to transfer to grade 6 at Wilbraham. Not individual names.
The only reason we did individual names is because we were told to do that by the attorney before. If the attorney says that that's how we can do it, I'm all in favor.
Right, if the council thinks that we can do it without having exposure. And it might also be nice to send a communication to the Hamden Select Board to say that we were looking at changing the process to make things easier on the families, if they were okay with it.
And then, does the school committee really need to make that vote? Is that something that
Yeah.
the school committee could say, we give the authority to the superintendent or his designee to say that all students that are in grade 5 that currently are attending Green Meadows Elementary School, that they can attend they will be attending 6th grade at Wilbraham Middle School? Is that something that really, that the school committee?
It does say here that it has to be, has to be approved by the school committee.
Yeah, it doesn't say committee or designee.
It just says committee. So let's just say into the interim, until we change the language, that we can just,
That's what I want to know. So I understand what it says. I'm asking for that change, for it to be, is it something that the school committee is comfortable by saying, even if it, or would it be possible for the superintendent
Yes.
to make that decision to say, you know what, we are going to allow all 5th graders that are moving up to 6th grade, they can attend middle school?
Yes.
Without the school committee
Yeah.
authorizing it?
Yes.
but again, it's putting the political pressure on John, and this is all on John. And what if it's something that we don't agree with? What if John makes the move, or a superintendent in the future, maybe not as wonderful as John, decides to say something that we don't agree with? I think it was here for a reason, and it's lasted this way, and the reason it's not undue on us to sit and take that vote, and I think it's best to keep the political pressure on us and not on the superintendent.
I feel there would be some significant pressure on John if he did not allow a 5th grader to advance to 6th grade.
Yes.
I think the pressure would be pretty big.
I think, to make this very simple, I would keep it the way it is. I know that this particular piece
Can you put a microphone?
agreement has been the most awful thing to deal with parents and with kids. It has taken us oodles of time, letters back and forth, screaming, you name it. And in the end, we got to, okay, I should write out, I want my kid here, open the, that's basically what happened.
We weren't
And-
taking,
Go ahead.
I said we weren't taking it away for the transfer process. We're just talking about for the end of the year process to next year, like bulk action.
That is because of the unique situation, that is the transfer process.
But we're talking the transfer. I thought the other part was like for elementary school, when elementary school was another
Yeah.
elementary school. Because that's what I asked to be,
And then change that.
that's what I asked to be
It's the same difference.
requested before. So I'm talking about in the transfer process simply from 5th grade to 6th grade, when you go from one, when there is no other choice,
Well,
then you avoid having to do it one kid at a time.
at last year's meeting, towards the end, what we were dealing with is the fact that the parents didn't have to do a letter because there were no other choices except. So you're saying the same thing
Right.
starting now in September.
No letters, because there's no choice.
There's no choice.
So why not just automate it?
So to put you and Sean together, what I'm guessing you're looking for is the committee to globally approve all 5th graders to advance to 6th grade in the Wolverhampton Middle School, and a letter to be sent to all the families saying, congratulations, your student is being
Not
moved up to 6th grade.
congratulations.
Okay.
Please don't send the congratulations.
Okay, fine. Your student is going to 6th grade in Wolverhampton Middle School, is this, we'd like to have your student attend 6th grade in Wolverhampton Middle School, is this all right with you?
What's the other choice?
Yes or no? Well, no, they have the right to say no,
And then what?
which has been my biggest anxiety over this thing for the last 2.5 years. They can, any one of them or all of them can say no, and it will create a big problem.
So actually, that's not what Desi said the last time we met with Desi. They said if you don't have a middle school in that town, how can they be educated? Of course, they would have to go over. We have an opportunity for your child to be educated in middle school. It's at Wilbraham Middle School. If you don't want that, I mean, there's homeschooling options, I guess. I don't know what the other options are. There are no other options right now.
Electronic.
So, I mean, yeah. I like the new text. I think the new text is great. And then especially when we go from, when we change the grades, so 6th,
So I think we're good. John,
Yeah.
he's going to reach out to the attorney, and we can circle back on that another time. Everyone all set?
actually, hang on one quick, middle
Oh.
school. Sorry, yep, go ahead.
Okay, awesome. We'll talk about this again. But we'll continue with the Assistant Superintendent for Finance, Operations, and Human Resources.
Wait, I thought we were also going to discuss that the DESI changes aren't going to impact this agreement a lot until.
Oh, that's for the Planning Committee update.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yep.
Keep going.
You ready? Okay. So, simply put, for the first sort of budget report of the new fiscal year, there's not a lot to report because we're so early in the year. I think the short story is just the things that we know we spend and expend in the early part of the fiscal year, either full year renewals, that type of thing, are all kind of within and around our expectations. So that's not worrying. And as a statement of a process, we encumber funds for our payroll throughout the whole year. We've done that for all the settled contracts with the new rates applied. For those unsettled contracts or in-process contracts, we granted steps to all those who were eligible for steps, and so are reflecting that in the document. But once we settle the contracts, we'll have to readjust, and so you'll see that evolve over the course of the fiscal year. Those are the primary things relative to the budget as it stands at the moment. I'd like to answer any questions someone might have had or seen or something that they have a question about relative to either the memo or the numbers.
Have we looked at what the E&D is from last year to this year?
Not yet. We're in the process of kind of putting the final bow on 25, and we'll be probably talking about that a little bit more in detail in September. We have to get our interview report done for the end of September. That helps us narrow down the details a little bit. We actually don't have to file our E&D certification until the end of October. So we'll have an absolute number at the end of October. We'll have a sense of it before then, clearly. Right now, so sort of two main pieces to that. Revenues that came in above expectation gives us some resources that may become E&D. Second is how does expenses look relative to budget and what's left over. As I mentioned, my last one of these in June, I think is still holding true, which is that the amount that we're going to have and be under our budgeted amounts for fiscal 25 are going to be pretty close. So that amount of resource that would become E&D will be less. So when we go to certify, the amount of E&D we currently have remaining is $370,000. That's a piece of that story that we put in when we certify, plus revenues above expectations, they get counted, and then of course any unspent budgeted amounts. So that's the piece that's still being worked out. It's going to be smaller than it certainly has been in the last couple of years. So I think our overall E&D that we'll be looking at for use in fiscal 27 will be less than what we had this year. We had a very robust number for the current fiscal 26.
Did we get the final numbers from the state on what we're actually getting per student?
Yes. So that's, and again, so that's an example both in fiscal 25 and 26, what we budgeted for say Chapter 78 versus what we received. What we received versus what we budgeted is much higher, so that's going to help us with regard to our E&D. So that's going to be an add to what we had. And we can leverage those funds during the year as long as what you voted and has been approved for an appropriation for the expenditure part isn't exceeded. So the fact that Chapter 70 is going to be higher than the number we budgeted, if we had some other number come in much lower than expected, those can counterbalance each other and we still meet the revenue, the expenses that have been approved. Shall I move on to the next thing? Okay. So, in planning the budget for fiscal 26, we were thinking about and building our budget based on our experience with our entitlement grants and made our plans accordingly. And so there's some news and then there's some good news. There's not really bad news in this regard, I would say. So in regard to Title I, we had budgeted a support level of about $175,000. That's on a par with what we received in 25. What we have as an allocation at the moment is a little over $300,000. So that was improved. I think what's happened for us is we're sitting on the sort of cusp of two different levels of funding relative to this. So last year we were below the line, this year above the line. And especially Title I, it's really about the community as a whole and not specifically the students in the building. That's part and parcel of that, but that's part of the good news is that award from Title I is higher, which allows us to support particular students of higher economic need in ways, but it also helps us support all students in that regard. If you look at Title IIA, what we received in 25, what we budgeted for 26 was in the order of about $45,000 for that. The allocation for the coming year is about $57,000, so it's a little higher. So that's another bit of good news for us. So we have some more resource available to us to use for that, which is around teacher quality and improvement in instruction. Title IV, the number in fiscal 25 was about $25,000. We used that in fiscal 25 to support our Title I work. We can do that with Title IV funds. We can use it to support Title I work. And so in that regard, we didn't have a budgeted amount in our fiscal 26. We were thinking we were probably going to be about the same level of funding with regard to our Title IV support. It's actually dropped. So it's about 12,000. So I guess that's slightly bad news. At the same time, we were not counting on any amount to specifically support our budget. So It's not harming us anyway. And then as we put our formal budgets together for these entitlement grants, we'll work on whether we have some Title IV spending we want to explicitly do, or whether we want to do what we did in fiscal '25, which is to put that funding toward Title I supports. For special education support, IDEA, there are really two parts. There's early childhood, which is the 262 grant. That has held essentially steady from last year to this year, almost exactly the same amount. We budgeted roughly at the same place, so that's sort of a neutral piece of information. For the 240 grant, which is more specifically for kids older than preschool, we had an expectation that our funding level would drop by about $50,000, so that's how we budgeted, and that's about where it came in. It's a smidge more of a drop than that, but not a lot more, so that's about on par with what we had. So I think the really most significantly positive news here regarding the entitlement grants is just that the Title I funding came in at a decidedly higher level than we were anticipating. So I think that gives us a lot of opportunity to do some really powerful work with regard to our Title I funding. I will mention one other thing was METCO, which is another grant that we get from the state for supporting students in our district that come to us from Springfield. When we were budgeting for that, we had an anticipation that they were going to change that funding formula pretty significantly. It turns out that they didn't. I think they got feedback from all the communities that do METCO, whether Western Mass or Eastern Mass. I think they sort of paused on that change to that, so our funding levels essentially held constant from what we had last year. So that's a positive for us because we had budgeted a much lower number of support there. So it allows us to support those METCO students in a similar way as we had done in the past. So I just want to mention that it's not an entitlement grant per se in that regard, but it is news in that has evolved over the summer that has clarified our picture. So I'm happy to pause there and see if anyone has any questions specifically about the entitlement grants and where our funding is sitting at this moment. Oh, the one other thing I will say, I know we spoke at, I believe our last meeting was around particularly Title II funding and whether or not it would be withheld or not. It turns out it ended up not being withheld, so we can fortunately make plans as expected now instead of having to wait and sort of decide what to do later if it showed up or not, so we can be much more planful and thoughtful about our use of those Title II funds from the beginning of the year, essentially. So barring any questions, I'll move on to the next piece, which is MSBA. So we, in March, had submitted 3 statements of interest for the Accelerated Repair Program for the MSBA. We had put in at Montreat for roof and doors, at Stony Hill for roof and windows, and for the middle school doors and windows. We'd done a roof a few years ago with them. We were contacted, and we knew that they would go through the process. They said, oh, it'll be summer before we get back to people about where we are in the process. It turned out to be a little later than expected, but it's partly because they received 99 applications. We were 3 of those 99, but 99 applications. 96 of those have moved forward in the process, which means they sort of met the requirements of that application. It's a fairly involved application. And so, to have only 3 districts not have met that is a statement to sort of folks that have taken this on to sort of do the due diligence and chase down the details and put them all in and that sort of thing. They did an on-site visit to our 3 schools yesterday. So we took a couple of folks from the MSBA staff around, and our 2 new principals were a part of that meeting and conversation. And so they went on the roof at Stony Hill and at Montreat to take a look at the circumstances and conditions there. And also take a general tour of the building to see what classrooms are looking like, where he's experiencing with roof, where he's experiencing leaks or problems with water infiltration. They're getting a general sense of the building's use, its occupancy, its capacity, its state of repair. All of those things are part of what they're evaluating as they walk through the building, posing questions to myself, custodial staff, facilities director there. Super provost was with us, principals were with us as well. One thing I will note is that for Montreat and Stony Hill, the thresholds for, criteria thresholds for doors and windows were such that we did not meet those, but they were still willing to sort of move us ahead relative to the roofs at both of those. At the middle school, the doors and windows were, sort of satisfactorily old enough and in such state that they were going to take that on as a consideration as well. So they didn't have to go on the roof at the middle school. So it was kind of a rainy day for them to be climbing on the roof, and the access points are what's called a ship's ladder, which is a perfectly vertical ladder, a little challenging, but nonetheless, they got up there and did their work. We did pose a few other questions to the folks at MSBA about a few things. We obviously have some questions about our HVAC at the middle school. At the time we were doing the application, I didn't think we had enough information or could put together a sufficient thing to ask them about a heat pump project, because they used to do boiler replacements, now they do the electrification and heat pump process. Our conversation yesterday with them about whether we could modify our application or not, which was a no, but also the fact that their general expectation would be you need to fix those other things like doors, windows before you do that big system. So they would have directed us in the way we went with regard to that, and then that will bolster potentially a future application relative to a heating system. The other question is whether they provide much feedback relative to whether we should and how schools go about evaluating whether to do an improvement program or to do like a core project and build a new building, that kind of thing. They don't provide much feedback on that, but at the same time, by virtue of considering and the investment in a school like our middle school, I think that's a statement to some extent that they're willing to do it if we're willing to do it, and so they feel like they can continue to invest in the infrastructure of a building like that and continue to meet its needs and continue to apply for MSBA project funding to help you support that ongoing use of that facility. I think the one other thing I'll say is that with this, I posed the question because one of the things that's happened in recent years with the accelerated repair was, and this is still true, there's lots of conversations about obligations we're going to have if we get involved in the project. We'll get to those in a minute. But some of it was like a lot of being careful about what they can or cannot express opinion about or say specifically, that sort of thing. We did ask them both because in past years, things like ages of roof have been a criteria that changes, and they've modified that because of the funds they had available and other limitations they had. So they tend to make adjustments to their requirements. That's still a possibility they can make those kind of adjustments to the requirements. But the sort of feedback they gave us was that it's unlikely they would make adjustments to the base requirements that they stated for roofs, which is 20 plus years in age, 30 or older for windows, that type of thing. Those aren't likely to be moved as they have been in the past. I think they feel as though they've got a greater level of support. So that makes me optimistic that they might very well move forward with all three of these projects in some respects. But in our obligations, the first thing we have to do is be able to find funding for a schematic design, or feasibility studies they're sometimes called. Those are for a single project. We try to get them to give us a ballpark. They're going to share some information with us. They haven't yet about what recent experience has been with other school districts doing similar kinds of things, but they're very quickly to say no guarantees, we can't promise anything. But all that being said, 100,000, 150,000 is not an unheard of number for the schematic design. How that would happen for, say, if they invite us forward for all three of these, how that would scale up. It's not a linear process. There's some overlap of effort, so that would be potentially a way to save a little bit, but they're very different places and circumstances, so it's not going to save that much. So we've got to kind of go through a little bit of the process and think about our strategy relative to getting the funding for schematic design, if invited forward. The MSBA staff will make recommendations to the full board. They will have a meeting in late October. I think it's the 29th, but I may have that date incorrect. where they will actually vote who's in, who's out as far as offers of projects. Once that happens, the staff will reach out to us and say, good news, you're in. And depending on, they'll have a couple of different sort of start dates, but once they sort of set that date, the clock starts for finding funding. And you've got to, for that feasibility study, you really have kind of 90 days to get your funding in order to make that happen. So again, back to our earlier conversation about, select board at Wilbraham and conversations around fall town meetings and capital planning and all of that. This will be part and parcel of some of that conversation as to, so what's the right number? Are they willing to do it? Are they ready to do it? Should we do it in the fall? There's nothing that prevents a school or a town voting a resource in advance of this. There's no spending of money until you actually get invited into the process. I worked in a district where they approved, they authorized debt for a roof project that just sat there until they did ultimately get involved in an MSBA process. So it took several years before that happened. So that's an okay thing to do. You don't spend the money, but you do have an authority to borrow or an authority to spend that can sort of sit and hold place for a while. So that's some of the conversation that we would have as well with them. That's partly a political and conversation with the communities. These three buildings are all in Wilbraham, so it's a Wilbraham-specific capital request and capital funding circumstance. They actually own the building, so that's also a piece of this as well. But strategizing about approaches to take in funding schematic designs and then subsequently the full projects. Once you do a schematic design, then you have another block of time, it's 14 months, but basically a year, to come up with the funding for the full project. The thing you get to at the end of the schematic design is biddable documents and a scope such that you have a sense of price. Until you actually go out to bid, you don't have anything yet, but you have their best estimates from your designers and your liaisons with the USBA to come up with numbers for that. I don't think there's anything else that I wanted to mention or add regarding this, but it does. I think the key thing, just speaking specifically of middle school, is if invited in to do doors and windows, that's sort of an investment in that structure. And in the intervening time, we still have questions regarding our HVAC and our and how much investment we make in the short term. What kind of project do we ask for? MSBA is taking accelerated repair requests. They did in the spring of 25. They'll do them again in the spring of 27. Funding decisions get made in the fall of 27. You do work in the sort of winter and spring, generally speaking. So you start to think about the timelines. You're sort of 4-ish plus years that we're trying to sort of determine what's the best thing to do relative to those HVAC questions and air quality and all of those things that we know need some attention. So what's our investment in the short term? What's our strategy relative to this? And that's also a piece of the puzzle as we think about how we have the conversations and what conversations we have with the Select Board, Finance Committee, and ultimately town meeting about funding and approaching these things and scoping projects and thinking about what and how we do what we need to do to make the environments as best we can in the timeframes and funding sources and timescales we have. Is there anything I missed? Speaking of, we've had some conversations and we've had any follow-up conversations, but I think I'm trying to hit all the mechanics of it primarily, but also I think what I was encouraged by was it struck me there's a reasonable chance that we might get invited in and potentially all three projects. So I think in the short term, we would be thinking along those lines, and as we think about reaching out to Wilbraham for funding, we need to be thinking and strategizing about how that would happen, when that would happen, and their capacity, how that fits into the rest of their capital plan. Is this going to move along? Initially, when we submitted statements of interest in March, I didn't have an expectation that they would be likely to fund 3 projects. That's not, but they've kind of changed the process. They've also had their funding structure change a little bit so they can afford to do more projects, which is great news for all of the school districts in the Commonwealth. But it does sort of change the dynamic for us as far as our conversations and our planning and the town's planning around this.
I just had a quick question regarding the cost. I know they didn't tell you, but generally speaking, the cost for the feasibility studies is approximately 100 to 150 per project. Is that right?
Per project as they stand alone, and they said, it's hard to judge when you do a dynamic thing. Again, they were going to share some information with us, so we're going to look at that they give us, which has some recent projects. We'll see what's, it is a circumstance with these kind of construction things. They've become a lot more dynamic in their costing than they have been in years past. So it's a challenge, and this is what makes them extra cautious about offering any advice whatsoever about this. So we'll look at that information as we define what we think is the right number to sort of think about and try to get appropriated or fund from sources we may have or think about.
My recollection and expectation would be that the cost would be slightly higher for the middle school because there's more engineering involved with windows than there is with roofs.
That is a point they made about window projects in particular. There's a lot of windows, and so there's just a lot more details to chase. And so I think that bolsters versus roofs. Roofs are a little more straightforward. That sounds silly, but in some ways, relatively speaking, it's so a windows and door project can be more challenging in that feasibility phase. Well, it's also challenging in the construction phase too, but certainly in that feasibility phase, it's got a little more detail and nuance because the windows are not all exactly the same size and exactly the same height. Exactly, there's just so much more variability to contend with.
So we're looking for just a feasibility study somewhere between $300,000 and $450,000. I mean, that's a very substantial number. I just think we should just say that and digest it. But again, I've never heard of them doing 3 projects with one town at one time and even encouraging us. So that is such great news because that could save us millions. Will save us millions.
Yeah, I think that's a rough estimate, like 450. But I think that's where we're going to take this data that they're going to give us. We're going to look at those projects, kind of see how that fits together. It is a circumstance where you want to be, you want to make sure you have the right capacity to fund it and to get the work done, so you can get that project moving in a positive way and keep the inertia of it moving along and building momentum for the bigger ask, which is going to be, the actual project cost.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you. Okay, so now it's time for public comment. Is there anyone here that's interested in making public comment this evening? Okay, we will continue with subcommittee updates. Curriculum subcommittee.
No update.
We'll move on to the planning subcommittee, or the planning committee. So we'll discuss the latest feedback and new developments from DESE.
So just very quickly, the main update we got from DESE is that the regulations that the board is considering in September, or is at least slated to consider in September, are not likely to have a significant impact on our ability to move forward with our proposed restated agreement. They said the most likely, again, there were some caveats there because the board could do more, but they said the most likely outcome would be moving things from one section of the regulations to another section of the regulations, which would mean that some of the citations that we currently have in the proposed agreement would have to be adjusted. And they further said that we could make those adjustments without having to go back to town meeting if we wanted to just line up our citations with where the new regulations end up landing in the code. So that was the information that was shared with the planning committee. And Mr. Ducey was going to share that with the board to see if that makes a difference, because one, with respect to the fall town meeting, because a major reason why the fall town meeting was not decided to be, that it was needed, was because of our prior conversation, given our concerns about the changes in regulations and whether that would allow us to have a product that was ready to put before the towns in the fall.
Okay. And then this is where we also have the discussion about the potential fall meeting in Wilbraham. So like you had.
I'd like to make a motion that we send a certified letter to the Select Board of Wilbraham that we would like to request a fall town meeting for the regional agreement amendment.
Second.
Questions and discussion?
It's prudent to discuss, do we want to also include the capital expense of the air handlers at the Wilbraham Middle School or not? I'm not sure. Are we ready numbers-wise with that for firm hard numbers?
So
It ran away, so I'm guessing no.
just to speak to both of those issues, with respect to the readiness for the agreement for the fall town meeting, there is one issue that is remaining hanging out there. It might be an issue, I was actually thinking that I might put it on the draft agenda for this tri-board meeting, which is how to handle the capital costs of the middle school.
There we go. That's where the rubber meets the road right there. That's the remaining issue, John, I'm sorry, right?
No, you're just supporting what I was going to say. So part of that meeting was that there was a willingness still potentially for the towns to continue negotiations on what they want the agreement to say with respect to some of the capital costs at the middle school, specifically middle costs that have been identified as problems in the past but have not been addressed yet, which would include doors and the HVAC system. So I wonder, where I'm kind of in a holding pattern right now is, will they come forward with a proposal that is supported by both towns of, this is what we'd like the agreement to say with respect to some of the pre-existing, to use the term, capital costs, or whether there should be carve-outs for some of the capital costs.
I fear that the select boards of Hamden and Wilbraham are at an impasse with regards to the legacy structural issues at Wilbraham Middle School. I strongly believe that to help us move forward, we're going to need strong numbers on those carve-outs. What will those be? And what would Hamden's piece of that be in the long run, right? I think if we have exact numbers, and right now I believe like it's the doors and the HVAC, I would like something from Hamden saying, we have issues with these two, because I don't want to, okay, we address these two and then a couple more pop up. I mean, I'd like to just, let's all get on the same page and then find out what is the actual number. And then from that, then hopefully we can move on with discussions, because I know we're ready. I know we wanted to get this done. I mean, it's been 2 years we've been trying to get this done and we've failed to do so. So, but I still think that is where the rubber meets the road.
I love the term legacy structural issues. That's what I'm going to use from now on. With respect to those, I would like to share that we had another tour of the middle school prior to the MSBA tour with staff from Wilbraham, where we showed them some of the issues that we're having with the HVAC system to try to just get a better understanding in their minds of the scope of the project. One of the things that I took away from that meeting is that I think Wilbraham would be potentially, at least those who are representing the position of Wilbraham, that it'd be potentially more open to an approach that was similar to the MSBA in terms of starting with a study, finding out what all the deficiencies are and what recommended repairs are in order to address the issues that have been noted with carbon dioxide, other matters. So one approach on that might be to start by requesting an appropriation of a sum of money in order to find out what the best, and this actually gets to what Doug was just talking about, what is the best approach to upgrading the system potentially with the capacity, a later MSBA project, to go to a completely different system.
Are you saying like a Band-Aid?
I'm saying that, yes, because as Doug was saying, you cannot qualify for any MSBA assistance with the middle school until you've placed the windows and the doors. And then you can't get back into the program for another 2 years. So we're talking about, best case scenario, 3 or 4 years until you could get a comprehensive replacement of the system. So what do you do in the interim? We still have the problem with the current status of the air in the building that students and staff are subjected to every day. Are there some things we could do that would make sense to mitigate the problem while waiting for potential opportunity to reapply to the MSBA and essentially replace the system?
So how much money for the study are we talking?
$150,000, right?
That is,
Wait, you're talking
that is
about
kind of where we...
A study for how to patch the system up, right?
Correct. That would also answer the question that we got sort of hung up on in the last round of this, which was, would the repairs that you're recommending make an appreciable difference in the school?
I think the other thing I would just say is I wouldn't use the MSBA sort of starter number that they gave us as a necessarily metric, because those schematic design are much more narrowly focused and defined in their approach. I think the questions we need to delve into a little bit are a little broader and more spread out. So I think that's and that was even part of the conversation with staff, both town staff and this wasn't political staff, but actual facility staff and both ours as well as some town staff about what are the questions we want to ask, what is the scope of what that study would be, and then start to sort of understanding that will help understand what's it going to cost to have someone come and figure that out with us. That's separate from, again, sort of what the projects cost to do. But I think that scope of that is a little, and it can be very broad and very different than what an MSBA process would look like. And so those are much more narrowly defined in what they're trying to do with those schematic design / feasibility studies than what we would potentially be looking at here. Because there's a number of variables we need to have explored relative to that HVAC question.
Well, Ed Sinandella, right? He is an HVAC expert, and he is an expert in all of our buildings. I believe he's retired, but like they say, once you get out, they pull you back in. If there is a way of maybe getting him to come in with his expertise, and he knows the building better than anyone else that we would bring in, is this something that he would be able to help us with? Because I still believe he helps out with different projects. Just to put us in the ballpark of what would that solution look like that would last us 4 years plus until potentially SBA would come and have these on us with a full, real solution. And maybe this is something that we can build off this solution rather than rip out and place. I don't know, I just saying let's use what we have.
I'm not sure the select board's gonna be satisfied though unless it's like an actual, report from an outside agency.
One of the things I would suggest is a way to clarify that is we could add it to the agenda that we're developing for that meeting.
Yeah, totally.
I'm not saying it would be the end-all be-all, I'm saying that he could, as a district and as the town of Wilbraham, say, this is my expertise, this is what I see as a possible solution and a possible direction, being in this range to set expectations, and then we could have someone come in and map it all out and such like that. But I'm just saying, right now we have no idea what would the Band-Aid look like, right?
Okay, we still have a motion on the floor. This is our discussion. The one other thing I'll point out is the Hampton Town meeting is October 27th, and their articles are due by September 15th. What's that?
The way that the regional agreement.
Yeah, just for the regional agreement.
So I think we would only be able to be ready with the regional agreement. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, and that's the reason I wanted to put that out there, is because
What's the motion that's on the floor? I made
to
it.
send a certified letter to.
Oh, yes.
the-
Did anyone second it?
It was been signed. This is the discussion portion.
Right, okay, so the letter is gonna be just for the regional agreement as I suggested, unless someone amends it, which doesn't sound like we're in a position to.
Is everyone satisfied with the discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Sounds like motion carries 7-0. Thank you. Okay. So we will continue with Finance Operations Technology Subcommittee.
We have not met yet this year.
Okay,
I mean, this school year.
this will do. LPVET Collaborative Representative.
I don't have anything to report.
Okay. Negotiation Subcommittee, nothing to report at this time. Policy Subcommittee.
We have not met, nothing to report, although it sounds like there are meetings in the near future. Here to town. I think this is gonna be another year like 2 years ago.
LPVET Corporation Representative.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Consent agenda.
Make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay. Questions or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. We'll now move on to the superintendent's report.
Thank you. I'll start with the August 1st enrollment number, just as a sort of pro forma thing. The number was 2,796, but it's not, it was accurate as of that date, but not a number that gives you much information because August is a heavy month of enrollments. So we'll have a better sense of where enrollment is on September 1st, and it really sort of locked in on October 1st. So I'll move on to my update, which will be an update on the implementation of our equity improvement plan. So let me begin by drawing your attention to the first item on page 5 of the plan. It identified partnering with either the Department of Education Safe Schools Office or the Massachusetts Aggression Reduction Center to improve climate. Last year, I reported that we would carry this step forward into the 24-25 school year because we didn't find either of those resources matched our needs. However, Training Active Bystanders program was right on point. In this June, we worked with them to train students in grades 4, 5, and 8 to interrupt bullying behavior and to teach their peers to interrupt bullying behavior. Those students will begin the process of training their peers this year in the active bystander approach to stop bullying. Accordingly, the status of this item has been changed from not started to in progress. I think this would also be a good time to give an update on our bullying prevention efforts. So I direct your attention to the 24-25 bullying update, which is a single sheet of paper. The headline is that as compared to the prior year, we saw an approximately 1/3 reduction in number of incidents of bullying, as well as the number of students targeted and the number of aggressors last year. The number of substantiated Incidents declined from 26 in the prior year to 17 in the year just ended. Male students continue to be the primary aggressors, accounting for nearly 90% of confirmed bullying in the district. Students with disabilities continue to be at significantly higher risk for bullying behavior, as more than 3/4 of the bullying incidents last year involved students with disabilities as the aggressors and as the targets of bullying. Identity-based harassment was the most common form of bullying, with the majority of cases involving racial epithets and a smaller number involving disability-based stereotypes. While the overall decreases in bullying behavior are positive and encouraging, we have more work to do to achieve our vision of equity. I hope the active bystander training we've recently completed will help us to continue to shift the school culture in a more inclusive direction. I did have a conversation with Josh about this because seeing that you have 75 or 76% of cases coming from a very small group of students who we can identify, essentially male students with disabilities aged 10 to 14, that's really where we want to target our training active bystander efforts first and use our trained students to really work with students with disabilities in those grades so that we can help to support them in different ways of behaving that are more inclusive and more affirming of others. So moving on to year 2, the first set of action steps listed on page 9 all have to do with increasing data literacy of educators in the district. You will see that I've identified most of the items on this page as in progress because, like many things in this plan, there's no real endpoint to data literacy. Many of these strategies require ongoing development and refinement. You heard some of that in the Sewell Road School Improvement Plan earlier tonight. To speak to the specifics of why I say these are all ongoing, the district's approach to data collection is comprehensive, intentional, and consistent, providing a robust foundation for understanding and supporting each student. The use of universal screeners in both academic and social emotional measures, such as the DIBELS, Imagine Math, Universal Number Sense Screener, AMath, SAVERS, and BEST, demonstrates a proactive strategy to identify students' needs from an early stage, and this is a consistent process across all grades in our district. So I think our strategy is well defined, it's intentional, and it's thoughtfully implemented to provide valuable data without creating an undue burden on staff or students. We utilize a combination of universal benchmark assessments and targeted unit assessments that are integrated directly into the curriculum. And we provide a timeline for administering benchmark tests like DIBELS and the Universal Number Sense Screener across all elementary schools. This ensures that students are screened regularly and that educators receive timely data to inform their instruction. And the district gathers a wide array of both academic and non-academic data to create a holistic view of each student. Academic data includes standardized assessments like MCAS, as well as specific tools for reading and math, such as FastBridge and AimsWeb. And this is complemented by a rich collection of non-academic data, including client surveys, friendship surveys, attendance records, Swiss discipline data, and information on counselor requests, nurse visits, and family dynamics. It's a multifaceted approach that allows educators to understand not just a student's performance, but also their environmental, social, and emotional factors that may be impacting their learning and well-being. Crucially, we've developed clear structures for data review that connect students' results to concrete instructional changes and intervention. The framework mandates an intervention and review meeting to examine student progress and monitor data after each intervention cycle. And the meetings are not just for review, but directly related to action with specific decision points such as continuing an intervention, discontinuing an intervention, or changing an intervention. And this direct connection between data and concrete instructional practice is part and parcel of the data culture we sought to create, because I can remember Carmen from Mass Insight saying when we got our equity audit, data is the engine that drives equity. So I think moving strongly ahead on that. As you know, we've also established an equity walk practice, so that's listed as completed. We just need to maintain that now. Currently, data about student performance on various assessments resides in many different databases and platforms. We've begun to evaluate whether the current data tools within the district have the capacity to be expanded to serve as a new system, or whether we need to bring in something else to manage and integrate our data so that it's easier to see multiple views at once. Additionally, we're exploring 3 other platforms to determine if they'd be a more appropriate fit. You know, I have this dream, I've asked Josh to look for this, of a platform that also integrates some AI functions so it can help teachers identify students who would benefit from an intervention, so that it isn't such a tedious task of going through student by student by student and comparing their profile to what the expected profile would be. So the only thing listed on page 9 that we haven't done is to create a district data team. We started at the school level, as you heard in the school improvement plan earlier tonight, so that we could get interventions to the students more quickly, but we should build some district structures for looking in data, so that will continue into next year. Turning to the next page, page 10, all of these statements have to do with creating and pursuing a vision of equity. As you know, we adopted a vision of equity statement for the district, which is the first item. Moving to the last item on that page, we've established disaggregated data analysis as the norm, which allows us to surface areas of specific concern, such as the one I stated just a few minutes ago when discussing bullying among male students with disabilities aged 10 to 14. We have also trained staff on the meaning of the vision of equity statement, and I think you heard some of that in the Sewell Road Improvement Plan that was presented tonight. It was goal 2, actually, which is almost a note-for-note cover of the vision of equity statement when it talks about making sure that all students are seen and valued. To this point, we have not reviewed or revised our mission, vision, or strategic plan and the district policies to make the equity commitments more explicit. However, we are beginning a district review process that will eventually lead to a new strategic plan. And the process will include an objective, in-depth look into the systems, structures, and practices of our district and how they affect student experiences and opportunities. And this will result in recommendations to support our district in implementing systemic improvements and advancing equitable outcomes for students and experiences, with a specific focus on equity, including racial equity, which is at the heart of the district review process. So the action steps from page 10 that will carry forward into the new year include developing a theory of change related to our vision of equity statement and developing shared terminology for diversity, equity, inclusion terms used throughout the district. And that's my report. Oh, actually, I did also want to share one other piece of information just related to where we stand on staffing as school is about to open. In general education, we're doing well. Really, the only vacancy we have is the coaching vacancy that we talked about the last meeting that was intentionally left vacant due to the unavailability of Title II funding. But as Doug just reported, that funding is now back. Where we're having some more vacancies is in special education. There's a substantially separate special education teacher at Green Meadows who told us yesterday they're not coming back. We have a substantially separate teacher in Stony Hill, also that we're looking to fill, a teacher who is still within the district but working in a different role. We have 2 special education paras that we're looking for at Stony Hill, 2 special education paras for Wilbraham Middle School, and we have 1 para at the high school, but we have hiring pending on that, so that may go to 0 in the very near future. Also, in terms of regular ed transportation, we currently have 27 of 28 drivers needed for the start of school. To quote the transportation supervisor, this is the best it's been in a very, very long time. Best hasn't been this close to being full since prior to the pandemic. So some good news and some work still to do on positions.
to throw this out there. I have talked to several people. It's just weird that they have said, hey, I would be interested in driving in the mornings. And, you know, it might be a good thing for me to get some insurance and stuff like that, you know, as a way. And I was like, I don't believe you get insurance with working part-time. If that's something that could be changed or edited, I think we can get a substantial amount more of people to at least cover. Some people can just do mornings, some people can just do afternoons, and that might also be something that we might want to look at.
Since your part of the report is enrollment, I don't know if anybody saw this week New York Times report, it was also on the Daily, of public schools losing billions of students already with the federal government giving money to send people to private schools. And right now Massachusetts hasn't accepted that money, but politically it's going to be hard to say, no, we don't want you to give money to our people who want to send their kids to private schools, which could cost us a lot. So just something out there that's going to be on the horizon. It's already costing Florida, Texas are doing it already, and it's costing millions of students from public schools.
Anything else? Thank you very much. Our next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, September 10th. Does 5:30 work for everybody? Or do you want to change it to 6 o'clock, 6:30? What time works?
Oh, this is Wednesday?
6:30 is
Yes.
better.
6:30 is better.
2 at 6:30?
Now that we're back into the,
Either's fine.
up onto the school age.
One more input?
6:30 is fine.
Okay, so the next meeting will be Wednesday, September 10th at 6:30. And then moving forward for our regularly scheduled meetings, 5:30, 6, 6:30.
Sometimes it's actually playing the Yankees, I appreciate you letting us get that money.
You can just put TV right up there.
We don't have to only put slides on.
That's right.
Is there a way that we could also do and announce that we'll have childcare for people who'd like to attend school committee meetings? Just throwing it out there. It might be something that would be helpful. I know it's helpful when we have the big meetings, but maybe do something with Minichog to have some students available.
I can share a request with the Service Club advisors, see what comes up.
Thank you. You have to bring attending for a couple of kids to sit there and practice for 3 hours.
I would have no problem with kids running around during the meeting at all.
Okay. Is there anything that anyone would like to add into the future agenda? You can think of right now, otherwise.
I would really like to talk about the bleachers. I do trust the Wilbraham structural engineers on them saying that the bleachers are structurally sound. I just don't trust the bleachers to remain structurally sound moving forward. I will be instructing my son and anyone who will listen not to go on the bleachers.
Or just stay on the bottom 3 rows, so it's less than a 15-foot
I would
fall.
say don't be anywhere near the bleachers.
Once you fall more than 15 feet, you're going to end up in the trauma.
There's winter coming, there's, you know, the way the students jump up and down and stuff during games. Like I said, I respect and trust the Wilbraham people that said that. I just don't trust the bleachers.
I'm hopeful, Sean, if we put together a presentation, you go to the towns talking about plan for replacement or, you know, looking at the practicalities of the ongoing costs of refurbishing them every 4 years, we might get the towns to buy into a commitment to replace them and, you know, but I don't think either of the towns can do it all at once, but maybe if they commit and then they start saving up money for 3 years, like that's what
And they see how
Wilbraham will
much
do with
money we've
fire.
already spent. You know, we spent that money 9 years ago. They think that we've saved that money for 9 years, but it's not true. We've spent, I would say, whatever the budget we were asking for 9 years ago, I think that we've spent over that in just, in I don't know what's the word you use that's correct anymore, but to piecemeal the bleachers and hobble them along year to year.
And once they're replaced, then it's, you know, it's an all aluminum construction, which is extremely low ongoing maintenance.
Amen.
So is this conversation satisfactory, or would you like to add on the next agenda? Just want to make sure.
Well, I think we need I think we need the facts on what we've spent in the renovations and when, and then what we think the next round of renovations might cost. Doesn't need to be on for the next meeting, when it's an appropriate time that Doug's able to have the actual numbers.
And a current bid if you have it. Or wherever you get that. Okay, anything else? All right, we do have a need for executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, C, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with HWEA or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body and the chair so declares. HWEA Unit C contract, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, 7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law, specifically Mass General Law, C, Chapter 214, Section 1B, Massachusetts Students' Records Law, Mass General Laws, Chapter 71, Section 34D, Massachusetts Students' Records Regulations 603 CMR 23 and Sequentia, and Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, 20 USC Section 1232G, and 34 CFR Part 99 regarding student transfer benefits.
So moved.
And second.
Second.
Okay, so we will not be returning to regular session. We will be adjourning from executive session. We'll do roll call. Cheryl?
Aye.
Tim?
Yes.
Sean?
Aye.
Lisa? Yes. Rich?
Yes.
Mike?
Yep.
Myself, aye. We're now moving to executive session, 8:11. We'll take 5 minutes, then we'll meet over in Josh's office.
5 minutes.